Good evening, folks. It's good to see you all here. I want to begin by thanking all the people that helped to make this possible. The Clarks, Wayne and Christy, Susan Estes, who did a lot of the reception, Rich Cheatham, who is doing our audio-visual live streaming of this service, of this performance. I'm sorry, I'm so used to the word service. It just pops out. And I want to thank Carlton Macy for being my professional page turner this evening. I'm just thinking, am I leaving anybody out? Probably. Well, of course. Our guest musician, Igor Poklad. For those of you who are members of the chapel, you've heard Igor before. You know what a fabulous musician he is. And it's a joy for me to get to work with him. So I'm really delighted to present this music that we're going to perform tonight. The first piece on the program is two movements from a sonata by George Friedrich Handel. Handel was a German and English composer. He's from Germany, but he later in his life moved to England and received English citizenship. Handel was arguably the most successful composer of the early 18th century, and he was actually during that time that he was composing and performing his music, he was lauded by Beethoven in 1823, who said about Handel, quote, "the greatest that ever lived." And Handel's music, many have become classics. We don't really get to experience Christmas without the Messiah, right? I think every year we hear it. How many times? From a very early age, Handel was motivated to expand his musical horizons. And at that time, one of the musical genres coming up on the scene was Italian opera. And he went to Italy, and he composed, and he became a very well-known, successful composer of Italian opera. But by 1710, he's living in London, and one of his commissions was for the King's entertainment on the River Thames in 1717, and this was when he composed Water Music, another famous piece. So, he has composed French-style dances of the type in vogue at the German courts of his time, and Italian opera, very popular in Italy, and also popular for a while in England when Handel got there. And, of course, the English style. Handel was certainly a composer who was, how shall I put it, aware of his talent. And he was not always in a congenial mood toward those whom he deemed, quote unquote, lesser musicians. There's an anecdote about Handel and Gordon, who was an English singer. They were rehearsing together for an upcoming performance. And this singer, Gordon, found fault with Handel's method of accompanying him. So, obviously, a heated argument ensued. And Gordon ended the argument by saying that if Handel persisted in accompanying him in that manner, he would jump up upon the harpsichord and smash it to pieces. Handel replied, "Oh, let me know when you will do that." and I will advertise it, for I am sure that more people will come to see you jump than hear you sing. So, two movements from a sonata by Handel. Frank Bridge was an English composer, conductor, and violist. He's best known for his contributions in chamber music and his influence on his most famous pupil, Benjamin Britten. According to Britten, Bridge had strong pacifist convictions and was deeply disturbed by the First World War, an event that he lived through. Bridge came from a musical family and studied at the Royal College of Music in London. And he had a unique musical style that changed throughout his life. He evolved as a composer. His early works were rooted in the Romantic tradition, characterized by lyric melodies and rich harmonies. Over time, his music adapted a more modernist and experimental approach, incorporating dissonance, chromaticism, and innovative forms. And after the war, Bridge really branched out and came under the influence of Alan Berg. And his music became much more dissonant and almost atonal. Bridge was not widely known during his life as a teacher of composition. As a matter of fact, all I've been able to find in the books and the literature is Benjamin Britten was his student. I don't know of any others. He had, of course, many students for viola and violin, but Bridge saw genius in the young Benjamin Britten, and not only taught him, but was a mentor for Britten. And according to Britten, he was a wonderful teacher and mentor. Britten said in 1963 that he still felt that he, Britten, hadn't yet come up to the technical standards that Bridge had set for him. This piece that I'm going to play is titled At Dawn, and it is a short piece for the left hand. So my right hand is going to take a nap, and the left hand is going to do all the heavy lifting. This piece was composed in 1911, and it has some very interesting chromaticisms, and it shows the influence of the French Impressionist movement. Well, this next composer needs no introduction. Wolfgang Mozart, born 1756, died 1791, all too young. He was an Austrian composer and one of the most prolific composers of the classical era. This piece that we're going to play is one movement from the Clarinet Concerto in A major, which was completed in 1791, just a few weeks before his death. And this concerto in its entirety was the final major work that Mozart composed. One person has described it as, quote, the composer's last instrumental work and his last great completed work of any kind. One critic called it Mozart's swan song. And this movement we're going to play, the Adagio, is just gorgeous. So, enjoy. I just don't want to talk or say anything after that. Let's just enjoy this moment. It's such a beautiful piece. So the next piece is also a beautiful piece. Different style, different composer, different country. This is Claude Debussy, one of my favorite composers, and in the opinion of many musicologists, one of the most important composers of the early 20th century. In 1888, or sometime in between 1888 and 1899, Debussy was composing 2 piano pieces that would be called the 2 arabesques. They were his first published piano pieces. So this is, for the piano repertoire, as early as you can get with Debussy. But what's an arabesque? An arabesque, for those of you that may not remember, can be a style of art, style of architecture. It can even be a style of dance. It is a figure, an artistic figure that is curvy, wavy, flowy, cascading, liquidy, if I can use that term. And this music that is attempting to connect with and somehow express something about this arabesqueness, it almost feels to me like the music is evocative and beautiful as it seeks to capture something ephemeral. This piece, while not as harmonically novel and experimental, exploratory as later Debussy will be, nevertheless makes a subtle but not inconsequential break with earlier musical structures. But I just enjoy it because I think it's a beautiful piece. going down the wrong side of me. Our next couple of pieces are by an English composer by the name of Gerald Finzi. He was born in 1901, died in 1956. He wrote a piece, a collection of 5 bagatelles, just before he was drafted into the war in 1941. In composing this piece for clarinet and piano, he used, in his words, quote, 20-year-old bits and pieces that he still hadn't used. And consequently, a few years later, in 1943, he added a 4th piece and then later a 5th bagatelle. So what started out to be 3 bagatelles eventually became 5. But I love the fact that this composer kept all of his notes during his lifetime. And so later in his life, he could go back to musical ideas that he never really fully explored and now explore them with the skills he has as an older composer. And I think these pieces are absolutely stunningly beautiful. The set quickly became quite a success for Finzi, and they still remain some of his most beloved music, especially for clarinetists. Interestingly, however, Finzi wasn't a great fan of the 5 bagatelles that he composed. He dismissed them, calling them only, quote, only trifle pieces, not worth much, but got better notices than my decent stuff, end quote. So composers don't always know, what is really going to move people, and I think these pieces are very moving. They are certainly considered by many musicologists to be some of Finzi's finest lyrical writing, as well as showcasing a wide range of rich tones and characters and emotional depth of the clarinet. Interesting factoid. Finzi was at one time a vegetarian, but then for some reason gave it up for eggs, bacon, and chicken. So, dietary practices aside, I am very grateful to Igor for introducing me to these pieces. So here are 3 of the 5 bagatelles by Finzi. So this next piece is for the piano. It is by a very famous German composer, Johannes Brahms. In addition to being a composer, he was a marvelous pianist and also a conductor. He adopted Robert and Clara Schumann as his family, and they were very close throughout his life. The two Rhapsodies, one of which I'll play, were composed in 1879 when Brahms was in his mid-40s. Now, a little bit later, after his mid-40s, when this piece was composed, he made a comment to the Schumanns that he was ending his career as a composer because he was now 50 years old. And composing is the work for the young. Fortunately, he didn't stick to his idea, and he did instead go on to compose many pieces, many of which are some of his most brilliant pieces in the repertoire, long after he was 50. So I'm grateful for that. This piece, this Rhapsody, is a very emotional, passionate, dramatic piece. Originally, he published them as simply two piano pieces, but they were dedicated to a composer and musician, friend of his. And it was that friend who said, well, listen, Brahms, you dedicated these to me. I think you should change the name from piano pieces to Rhapsodies. And Brahms reluctantly complied. So that's how these came to be called Rhapsodies. Is this where they should be? Oh, thank you. Too many notes. Peter.
Before we go to Rick's work, which we're going to do next, you can't let this concert end without thanking Rick for 27 years of great musical contributions to this congregation and to this community. He really is an enormous composition talent, and he intends, when he's not writing sermons every night, to spend a little time at the piano and try to make some major contributions to the musical world. And it will not surprise me at all if 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years from now, either in a cold little chapel like this or a great concert hall, we'll hear the music of Rick Yarmonti. And I thank you on behalf of all of us. I'm not commissioned to do this, but I am moved to do this. I thank you very much for that wonderful time.
Thank you. I don't know how I can see the music anymore. Thank you, Peter. This next piece that Igor and I will perform is the most recent piece I've composed, and it was inspired by the Sierras in Stanislaus National Forest, where thanks to a good friend of mine, Bodie and I get to go up and hike and enjoy nature and the beauty of that area. And one of my favorite places to go to, even though I think I've only been there twice, is Herring Creek. Oftentimes when I go, it's still spring. There's still a lot of snow on the ground. There are a lot of trees that are knocked down over the winter storms, and all the trails are not open. And I usually do not get to go to Herring Creek because it's closed. And this past spring, when I was there, it was open. And so for the second time, I got to do this hike to Herring Creek. There's a reservoir, the creek flows into the reservoir, and it is just stunningly beautiful. And the last time I was there, I was the only person there. It was just me and Bodie, and the geese, and the birds, and maybe a bear or two. I didn't see them, but you know they're there. And I sat down on this large rock. I'm sure Bodie didn't know what was going on, and just sat there for 20 minutes or more, because I didn't want to move. I didn't want to leave this place. It was so profoundly beautiful and speaking to me. And eventually, we did get up and leave and walk back to the car. I was very aware of how light my body was. That those 20 or 30 minutes sitting there and just meditating, just being there in the beauty of the wilderness, had really lightened a huge load. And I started to hear some music, actually. Now, I wasn't able to write it down. I wasn't close to a piano. But later when I got home, I started reflecting on this and trying to write a piece for Igor to play. Because as you know, he's an incredible musician, and composers love to write music for incredible musicians. And I wrote this piece that reminds me of that experience. It begins with a very free, back and forth, mysterious theme in between the clarinet and the piano. And then something more rhythmic happens. And it's like, oh, I'm getting to hike now. I'm going on a journey. And then everything slows down into the third and final section of the piece. And that's the time at the lake, just being in the stillness and the quiet and the beauty. So, I hope you enjoy. Just this one. Yeah, those two. That's it. A piece that I composed 17 years ago. And it was based on a scripture reading in the book of Isaiah that goes like this. You shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. So it's kind of a closing blessing, if you will. And it's a little different style than that last piece you just heard. But I hope it has some joy, some energy, and lifts your spirits as we conclude our musical program tonight. Thank you all for being here and for your support of the chapel. Beautiful job. Did we do one more? Oh, you sweetheart. Thank you. Please be seated. We have one more we can do for you. This is a beautiful, short song by Fauré.